Good afternoon and welcome to the second masterclass in the Logic and Magic UX Masterclass series. You'll have witnessed in our opening video some of our brilliantly delivered work and impressive clients. We were formerly known as Lo and Behold, but we're now Logic and Magic. And yeah, we're delighted with the interest, outreach, and the number of folks who have signed up. And it's great to see some familiar faces from our first UX masterclass, our clients, and the UX Roundtables community. We hope to share some small bits of wisdom with you all in the world of UX today. The topic today, as you'll know, focuses on getting UX research right, making the most of data we work so hard to gather, and we will touch on some UX research fundamentals throughout. So let's kick off with a few introductions before we get into the detail. My name is Connor McCann. My role at Logic and Magic is as a senior UX designer. And if you want to reach out after today and continue in any UX conversations or topics covered, my email is connor.mccann@logic-and-magic.agency. I'm also joined today by my colleague Joanne Moore, who I will hand over to intro herself.
Thanks, Connor. Hi, everyone. My name is Joanne, and I'm a hybrid UX designer here at Logic and Magic. So, hybrid UX designer just means I get to work between both UX research and UX design, and I've been in this position for the last 2 years. As Connor mentioned before, feel free to get in touch on my email there, joanne.moore@logicandmagic.agency, if you want to have any more questions or just want to chat on any further topics.
Thanks, Joanne. If you're following this event on LinkedIn, YouTube, or in StreamYard, I'll strongly encourage you to interact and comment as we talk about this topic during the masterclass and also afterwards in social media. Our promise to you and what we're lined up to cover during the next 35 to 40 minutes will be based on sharing some of our insights and our experiences over the last number of years in delivering UX research and what we've learned. You can see some of the topics that we've got lined up. We're going to kick off by sharing a little about the research landscape. We will spend some time thinking about how different we are to our users, how and why we should avoid any bias, and then we're going to try and wrap up some things and thinking about the differences between behavioral and attitudinal types of research. We will also do a few things following this masterclass. We will give you access to the video recording. We will also answer as many questions as we can that you've added in the comments. We have some time at the end for a Q&A, but if we can't answer all of your questions within the time, we'll follow up and make those questions and answers available on our website insights. Lastly, we are going to give a free UX audit away to one of you, so please stay tuned for the details on that throughout the masterclass. I'm going to kick off and get started into the research landscape. And the big message or the big principle of the research landscape is that we get the richest possible understanding of our customers when we try to see the world through their eyes in a number of different ways. And what I mean is this. Think about a regular graph in terms of Google Analytics 4 and the traffic coming to your website. You might look at the graphic like this, and you might see the peaks and troughs of traffic as a site goes through your regular monthly, quarterly, or annual cycle. But the important thing about looking at something like analytics is behind every visit, there's a human. Behind every visit, there is someone who has a need, who has a task, who has a reason for being on your site, and who's there in order to get something done. Some of those customers will be sweet spot users for you. There'll be people who you would love to do business with, those who have budget, those who have needs that match what you do, and you want to look after those people and you want to serve their needs, but you might have users also who are maybe classed as tire kickers, who don't have budget, who may be competitors, who you've really no particular interest in serving. And what I'm getting at here is that the numbers give us a good insight about what's going on, what we need to push, and try and understand the human stories behind the numbers. So when we think of the research landscape, which is available to us, what we are really talking about is we're thinking about how we can understand not just the broad numbers, but the human stories behind those numbers. This question has been on the minds of UX professionals for a long time. And in 2014, a guy called Christian Rohr put together a very helpful research landscape query to help us understand the different types of research that is available and the different types of methods which happen across the landscape. There are two axes on this landscape. The first axis is the behavioral attitudinal axis. Behavioral research measures human behavior. Attitudinal research measures human opinion. And the big dynamic here is that behavioral research is a much more accurate predictor of future user behavior compared to attitudinal research. Behavioral research gets much more statistically powerful, much more quickly than opinion-led research. So if we were running a survey, for instance, which measures opinion, we would be wanting a large number of responses to that survey. Depending on what we were asking before, we would deem that survey to be statistically meaningful. However, whenever it comes to something like usability testing, we know that with a much smaller number of usability test subjects, we can identify a high percentage of the usability issues, near 80% actually. So yeah, quite a significant number. Behavioral research is a very powerful mechanism in which we can understand how our software, our designs, or our digital products work in the real world. And it's also helpful because it's a real predictor of future performance. The single best clue as to how it will act and behave today, tomorrow, next week is how it acted yesterday, the day before, the day before that. There's something very accurate about using current and previous behavior as a barometer of likely future behavior. We straight away can think of similar scenarios that uses current and previous behaviors as future predictors, thinking about things like sports predictions, weather forecast, traffic updates, to name a few. Yeah, so the other axis then is the qualitative quantitative axis. Quantitative information tells us what's going on, while qualitative information gives us clues as to why it's going on. So to give you an example of that in action, let's say you look around an e-commerce website, and let's say you notice a step between step 3 and 4 on a checkout process. 75% of your users fell away and didn't complete that. Quantitative insight would correctly tell you that you're almost definitely letting your users down, as 3/4 of them aren't going any further. But what do you do about it? What's the problem that you need to fix? Why is it happening? Well, the answer is in the quantitative information, or sorry, isn't in the quantitative information alone. And it will tell you to, so what you might do is, you maybe set up an exit survey, and as users try to leave, you might ask them, we see you're trying to leave and the website, so why are you leaving now? Most users won't tell you, but some will. So let's say, for example, you display that question to 10,000 users and you get 1,000 replies. And of those 1,000 replies, 500 of those are to do with postage and packaging. Perhaps the postage and packaging was too expensive, or it was confusing, or it was maybe poorly calculated, or it was mentioned too late in the flow. You have a bundle of information around the reasons why people are leaving, and all of a sudden, what you've got now, you've got a quantitative insight. 3/4 of the people are leaving, with the qualitative insight of the people we have spoken to. Half of them are leaving because of the packaging. You can bring the qualitative and quantitative insights together, and all of a sudden you're empowered to make design decisions. So the reason that I share that is I want to build up this picture that when we get both behavioral and attitudinal insights, and we also get qualitative and quantitative insights about our users, it allows us to build up a rich picture of their motivations, their needs, their behaviors, and their actions, or maybe things they need, the reasons that they're there behaving in a certain way, the reasons that they're not completing tasks, and they're not finding what they want. There's a richness to choosing the right methods across the research landscape, as Roar has put together. And I think the big message, or the challenge that we'd love to leave with you as part of today, is to encourage you to get out of the data quadrant. Don't spend all your time purely in the data. Now, the data is massively valuable, and helping you understand that, or helping you understand what the people do, and helping you understand how many people are doing it, or how much it is happening, it gives you a really good broad picture. But as you can see, according to Roar, why and how it affects tends to be over onto the qualitative side. And that's where we go digging to find the human stories under motivations behind, what the numbers are saying. So here's how sometimes we lay out this graph, and you'll see the top right hand quadrant where we've got quantitative statistics or analytics. We don't have time today to go into analytics in too much detail. Hopefully we'll get a chance to do that in another UX masterclass soon. All I'll say is please invest in your data layer. We often come up against ambitious design teams and ambitious UX teams who are trying to attract the attention of senior managers and stakeholders to do a UX project. And because they're underinvesting in their data and underinvested in their numbers, they can't speak articulately in a language that the board understands about how their digital products and services are behaving. And you can only do that if you're properly invested in the data layer. So moving over to the top left quadrant, we're still in observational. So we're measuring behavior, and we're in qualitative. So we won't understand why things are happening. Everything in the top left-hand quadrant involves watching humans use technology or use computers. There's a big fight as we move over to qualitative to specifically try to mitigate against bias. For instance, we know that if you're sitting on your sofa on a Friday night and you're wanting to buy some new summer clothes for our 2-day summer spell that we're having, you also might be sitting on your sofa drinking a cup of tea, and you may be looking around your favorite e-commerce website and looking for a pair of trainers. And if that experience gets frustrating or confusing, you may just give up and close your laptop, lock your phone, lock your tablet, and finish your tea and maybe watch something on Netflix. But if you're a user, and you're invited into a lab and you're being watched, and there's a researcher beside you, and the researcher asks you on that Friday night to find a pair of trainers, you're much more likely to work harder to find a pair of trainers than you might be in the real world. So because things like usability testing have an artificial nature, we've got to work really carefully to make sure that how we construct our tests, the questions that we ask, how you put your users at ease, how we reward them in terms of maybe a level of incentive that we give them. We've got to make sure that we've set up to be as true to real life as we can, and make it because of that. Whereas usability test is bringing the user to where the researcher is. Contextual inquiries and field studies are about bringing the researcher to where the user is. So if usability tests happen in meeting rooms and usability labs, contextual inquiries and field studies happen in homes, in houses, in offices, in coffee shops, and on streets. So contextual inquiries is the researcher's commitment to getting to where the user is in their natural habitat. Moving then down to that bottom left quadrant, we have qualitative and attitudinal. So we're looking at why, and we're measuring opinion. All research is prone to bias, as we will share in a few slides time, but that bottom left quadrant is a bias red zone. It's in the bottom left-hand quadrant that data is the noisiest, and insights are potentially the murkiest. So you might be tempted not to go in there often, but But the difficulty is that it's often in that quadrant where we discover the piece of gold, the golden nugget we get. You get a little insight, the throwaway comment that the user makes that actually unlocks the puzzle for us. So how do we find a middle ground in this instance? If you like, there's a number of things that we can do, and you can consider in that quadrant. Number one, just because it's noisy and murky and prone to bias, it doesn't mean we should shy away from going in there. We go in after the insight and the quadrant as we do in all our quadrants. But the second thing that we do is we absolutely commit ourselves to best practice. We know that phrase is probably most overused and what we do, but what we mean by it is that there's lots of brilliant stuff written about how we facilitate a focus group, how to recruit a focus group, or how to manage big personalities in focus groups, how to keep conversations focused, questions to ask interviewees, questions not to ask, avoiding certain types of questions, and so on. So the second thing that we do is we make sure that if we're going to go in there, that we have our eyes wide open about best practice. And the third thing that we do in this quadrant is that we make sure that we never undertake a program of research which is only in that quadrant. We always make sure that we are active in others to allow us to calibrate or measure or to balance what we hear in that quadrant against what we learn and understand in others, because what that allows us to do is gather everything together, but being active in other quadrants allows us to kind of wash and shake that dirt and dust off what we hear in that quadrant, so the gems begin to emerge. The final quadrant then is quantitative. So again, we're measuring what's happening within attitudinal. It's based on opinion, and again in this area we find that there's great value to be had in things like online surveys, in speaking to people in places like customer call centers, email, phone, listening in on calls, reading emails, going on to social media, message board mining, and we get loads of really good stuff there. And the underlying message in this research landscape is that there is information all around us that gives us the clues to who users are and what matters to them, how they behave, why they behave that way, and so on. And every time we go in search of a piece of insight, it helps us to do design better. A phrase that comes to mind in this instance is no design ever got worse as a result of a measured encounter with a user. Every time we influence how we do design with established empirical user need, user motivations, and so on, we give ourselves the best chance of hitting the button in terms of what users need and expect from us. So that's the landscape. As I mentioned earlier, in future UX master classes, we're going to deep dive into some of the quadrants, but that gives you a broad overview of it. And the big takeaway points as we move on into the next section is that there's loads of data and loads of insight about our users in lots of different places and pieces. So get after it. Every piece of insight you get with what matters to your users empowers you to do better design. At this point, I'll hand across to Joanne.
Thanks, Connor, and thanks for explaining all those research methods and where they sit in that research landscape. So we have a bit of an interaction here to get you involved, so I hope you're paying attention in the last few slides. That'll help you answer these questions. So we've got 2 questions coming up on quantitative and qualitative usability testing. So first question here we have is, what is the recommended number of participants for quantitative usability testing? So is it A, 20, is it B, 40, or is it C, 60? So get your answers into the chat and also give a reason why you think that. So yeah, as the answers come in, I'll just say, as Connor previously discussed, quantitative metrics is basically numbers. So how many participants do we need to start to get accurate results? The test can be based on users' performance on a given task, and these are examples like task completion times, success rates, or number of errors. So get your answers into the chat there. Is it A, 20 participants, B, 40, or C, 60? A scenario that might help put this into perspective is that we might want to know what percentage of our users are able to book a hotel room on our site. So we can't ask every user, but we can ask a subset of our target population. So what do you think there? Some answer B coming in there, not too big, not too small. Oh, a few B's. So that's 40 participants.
Yeah.
Most people are just answering B. Yeah, I think we have a consensus here.
I think B.
Yeah, I think B is the winner. So let's see if these are right. So the answer is, answer is B. Everyone knows. 40 participants. So the Nielsen and Norman group recommend that you have 40 participants for any quantitative usability test. So if you use too few participants, the results may not be statistically reliable. And if you use too many, your results may not differ. So you're spending budget when it could be used elsewhere. So next we'll go on to the qualitative user testing. So the question here is, what is the recommended number of participants for qualitative user testing? So slightly different here. Is the answer A, 5, B, 10, or C, 15? So again, get your answers into the chat and give a reason why you think as well would be great. So the difference here would be the qualitative user testing is where you would observe how participants interact with a specific UI element and see which aspects of the design that they're having issues with and what works well. So how many do you think that we need there? Is it 5, 10, or 15? And then a scenario here could be that we want to see if there's anything that prevents the users from, say, submitting a form. So we kind of view how the user would go through that process. So get your answers into the chat there. How many you think it is? Is it A, B, or C? 5, 10, or 15?
This really proves who was listening in the previous slides.
Yeah. So some answers coming in there. Do some C and A as well. So what do you guys think? Geez, a small group or a larger group? So kind of a mixed answers there. So we'll go on to the answer then. What do we think it is? So the answer is 5. Yeah. So the Nielsen and group say that the best results come from testing no more than 5 users and running many small tests as you can afford. So they say after 5 tests, you'll generally start to see the same patterns and you won't learn anything new. So an example here is, say you discover an issue users are having with adding to cart. So you'll test 5 users to find the issue, do a redesign, then test again with 5 users. So instead of doing 10 users just to find out what the issue is, it's better to spread out the 5 users. So just to recap on the question, so qualitative and quantitative user testing are complementary methods that serve different goals. So qualitative user testing directly identifies the main usability problem in an interface and often informs the design process. And while quantitative user testing is typically used to track the usability of a system over design iterations. So let us know what you think of those answers in the comments. Are the numbers what you expected? Get writing in the chat.
Thanks, Joanne, for that. This is maybe very obvious that it might not bear repeating, but in Logic and Magic, it's almost our UX team motto. So we stand up and start of a Monday morning and say 10 times, I am not the user. I am not the user. I am not the user. Because the truth is that we must design for the user. We don't actually do that, just in case anyone thinks it. But yeah, we must always remember that the user is probably less like us than we think, and we've got to make sure that if we're going to design for them, that we know them. We only earn the right to design for somebody when we know what matters to them. There's so much that I could say about how different we are to our users. Yeah, so again, I'll pass across to Joanne now, and she'll go through an example just to highlight this.
Yeah, thanks, Connor. So I just want to focus on a couple of pieces of data I'd like to tell you about, which is the largest usability study ever undertaken and was sponsored by the OECD. The data was collected from 2011 to 2015 and was published in 2016, so quite a long time. So what was the test about? They wanted to know about the economically developed world. So through the 33 countries that make up the OECD, they wanted to know what the degree of computer literacy amongst adults. So in total, there was around 216,000 people tested, with at least 5,000 participants in most countries. The large scale of the study explains why it took so many years for this to be published. So for the process, users were given 14 tasks and they were asked to complete these tasks in order, with each task being a little bit more difficult than the preceding task. So once the user failed a task, the test was over, and then they were graded depending on how far they got. So some users completed all 14, some got 12, 5, and so on. So then what happened was the researchers grouped these users into 4 different levels, with level 1 being barely IT literate and level 4 being an expert. So here's what they found. Below level 1 was 26%, so they can't use computers. Level 1 is 14%, so they're barely IT literate. Level 2 is 29%, so modern IT skills. Level 3 is 26% with good IT skills. And level 4 is 5%, so expert IT skills. So I have another question for you here to answer into the chat. So what level would you say would you place yourself in? So get your answers into the chat there, and don't forget to explain why you're giving that answer. So I'll just repeat these again. What level do you think that you're at? Are you below level 1? They can't use computers, which I don't think so, or you wouldn't be on this webinar. Level 1 is barely IT literate. Level 2, modern IT skills. Level 3, good IT skills. And level 4, expert IT skills. So right into the chat there, what level do you think that you're at from this scale? So yeah, right, get in your answers there. So you might be thinking though, like, why does it matter? Like, why is it important to know what level you're at? It's important to know because everyone on this call is almost definitely at level 5. So yeah, if you answered level 5, that's great. So I'm in the 5%, but I'm not boasting. It's just my job to be there. So all of my colleagues at Logica Magic are in the 5%. Most of our clients are in the 5%. So when I go to industry events, everybody that I meet is in the 5%. So in other words, I live my life in that level 4 or 5% area. And it's when you live in that 5% area, it's easy to forget that you can do things with technology and you understand technology in a way that 95% of the population don't. So you can do things with design, with technology, which 95% of people can't. And if you don't break out of that 5%, then who are you going to end up designing for? So we're going to end up designing for our friends, colleagues, bosses, our peers, or awards judges. We're going to end up designing for anybody other than the people that we're there to design for in the first place. So it's hard to think of something which represents the opposite of design more than designers designing designs for designers. So good design should work in the real world with a crystal clear design target. So please remember, you can do things most people can't on computers. If you or your colleagues ever hear someone say, oh, our users would never do ABC, stop for a moment and ask, do you really mean your users would never do that? Or do you mean I would never do that? If someone says, your users know how to do A, B, and C, just question yourself and think, do they know that for a fact? Or are they just saying that I know how to do A, B, and C? Jacob Nielsen, who is our hero of our UX and usability world, puts it really well. He says, most expensive lesson that most digitally untransformed companies have yet to learn is that their users are much less like them than they realize. So the reason that we have to do research is because we're not like our users. If we were our users, we wouldn't have to do research. We would just ask what our opinion was and we would just do what we wanted. So research exists as a critical part of the UX process, specifically because we are not our users, and frequently we find out that our users are much less like us than we actually understand.
If we look at one of the biggest digital success stories of the last 10 to 15 years in the UK, the running of gov.uk, which was spearheaded for a large portion of the time by this guy, Russell Davies, is accessed in the UK 79 times. It's done online. The reason that Davis was able to break out of level 4 and level 3 and get right down into that level 2 user was because he recognized his user motivations. Hopefully most of his users don't think about him or notice him. They just use the service and get on with their lives. Davis was brilliant at understanding that the whole point wasn't about him; it was about his users. And yeah, that's a pretty common quote from him. So and well known one. Okay, so yeah, we're going to move on into our next section and look at how we see the world. We will start with how each of us can avoid bias when we're doing our research. So related to cognitive bias is framing, and according to the framing effect, we react differently to the same information depending on how it's worded. In his best-selling book, Thinking Fast and Slow, which some of the people on the call you might have it sitting on your desk or you might have read through it. Is yes, a best-selling book by researcher Daniel Kinnaman. And it demonstrates through a range of studies how framing the same information differently can lead to opposing decisions being made, and how it isn't always easy to identify when language is leading. So yes, I suppose looking at this slide itself and the different squares, do you ever recognize these cognitive bias examples playing out? Do you either pull back? Is it if it's yourself, or change tact if it's someone else? If so, yeah, feel free to drop in the comments if there's anyone that particularly stands out to you as something that you maybe see often or you've seen yourself doing. I think if I was going to pick one from this list that I often suppose see myself doing and have to take a step back, or suppose helicopter mode on it, is that number 7, confirmation bias. I think that's one of the biggest ones for me is trying to always pull back, and there's so many different parts in there as well. So yeah, that'd be interesting just to hear, and yeah, definitely add in the comments if you'd like. So to help demonstrate this, here's a clip from Yes, Prime Minister. It's a British political satire sitcom from the 1980s. This is from slightly before my sitcom watching appreciation, but it rings as true now as it did then. And yeah, you might have seen it before. So we'll play it and watch this through.
He's going to say something new and radical in the broadcast.
What, that silly grand design? Bernard, that was precisely what you had to avoid. How did this come about? I shall need a very good explanation.
Well, he's very keen on it.
What's that got to do with it? Things don't happen just because prime ministers are very keen on them. Neville Chamberlain was very keen on peace.
Yes, he thinks it's a vote winner.
Ah, that's more serious. Done. What makes him think that?
Well, the party have had an opinion poll done. It seems all the voters are in favour of bringing back national service.
Well, have another opinion poll done showing the voters are against bringing back national service.
We can't be for it and
Oh, of
against.
course they can, Bernard. Have you ever been surveyed?
Yes, well, not me, actually, my house. Oh, I see what you mean.
Well, Bernard, you know what happens. Nice young lady comes up to you. Obviously, you want to create a good impression. You don't want to look a fool, do you? No. So she starts asking you some questions. Mr. Woolley, are you worried about the number of young people without jobs?
Yes.
Are you worried about the rise in crime among teenagers?
Yes.
Do you think there's a lack of discipline in our comprehensive schools?
Yes.
Do you think young people welcome some authority and leadership in their lives?
Yes.
Do you think they respond to a challenge?
Yes.
Would you be in favour of reintroducing national service?
Yes. Oh, well, I suppose I might.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Of course you would, Bernard. After all you've told you can't say no to that. So, they don't mention the first 5 questions, they publish the last one.
Is that really what they do?
Well, not the reputable ones, no, but there aren't many of those. So, alternatively, the young lady can get the opposite result.
How?
Mr. Woolley, are you worried about the danger of war?
Yes.
Are you worried about the growth of armaments?
Yes.
Do you think there's a danger in giving young people guns and teaching them how to kill?
Yes.
Do you think it's wrong to force people to take up arms against their will?
Yes.
Would you oppose the reintroduction of national service?
Yes.
There you are, you see, Bernard. The perfect balanced sample. So, we just commissioned our own survey for the Ministry of Defence. See to it, Bernard.
Yeah, so this clip shows the use of leading questions in action. The first set of questions are designed to trigger an agreement. So yes, seems the obvious answer to each of the questions. And in the second half, Sir Appleby demonstrates that the flipping the questions can make the respondent oppose the introduction of national service. Leading questions have the potential to softly change respondents' opinions about a topic and answer them in a particular way. And in research, it is really important to recognize our own biases, because you may frame the question that confirms your hypothesis instead of finding out what the objective truth is. If you don't recognize this in the research stage, you may end up designing a solution primarily for yourself. So yeah. The framing effect can also have a huge implications, and this is what happened to Walmart. When within the anti-cluttering project, they lost the retailer almost $2 billion. They ran a survey as part of a wider program of research, asking customers a simple question: would you like Walmart to be less cluttered? And of course, the customer said yes. That's a no-brainer, right? And that one specific question, believe it or not, derailed the whole of the wider research program. Walmart listened to their customers' answers to this one question and spent a lot of time and money reducing their inventory and making storage more spacious. And this is what lost the company almost $2 billion. The team working on the project were fired, and all the changes in the stores were reversed. So although it was good that they listened to their customers, they were asking leading questions initially, and Walmart didn't observe to see what customers wanted. Instead, they come up with a hypothesis not based on user research, and then they expected their customers to be able to validate that with a yes/no question. What they should have done is they should have examined consumer behavior in the stores, and they would have noticed, for example, people did like to see bargains at the very front of the store. Instead, they come up with the answer first and then answered customers to agree with us. Observing is more powerful than listening, so the lessons really are here. Don't ask customers for answers. It's your job to figure out what problems your customers are having. The famous quote by the great innovator Henry Ford, who over a century ago revolutionized the motor industry. He provided affordable cars to the masses and is credited with introducing the moving assembly line in his factories. And he's also credited with famously saying, if we'd asked our customers what they wanted, they would have asked for faster horses. And the point Ford was making here was conceptual. His customers wanted the ability to move faster from point A to point B. And if he had asked them for the literal interpretation of what they wanted at the time, they would have said they wanted faster horses. Ford understood the problem, that people needed to travel faster. They just didn't know how to go about it. And this is where research insights can help to guide innovation. Investing in getting to know your user problem and not what they think the solution is. It's these research insights that guide innovation, and every business and organization needs to have an explicit understanding of their customer challenges. And if you can accurately pinpoint your users' needs, you can begin to highlight the best opportunities and for innovation. And this is really what a user-centered approach is. We have an example case study to wrap up. I'm conscious that we're getting near our time limit, so I'll share it, and then we'll get into looking at some of your questions. So let me show you this example of behavior versus opinion in action. It's not from the world of technology, but I hope that it lets you see how a rounded approach and a behaviorally driven approach helps us to uncover really excellent nuggets. So yes, let me tell you about Heinz. In the early 1990s, Heinz, as you won't need me to tell you, are a global mega brand. They are up there with McDonald's and Nike and some of the world's most recognizable brands. Not only are they a mega brand in nearly every geography within which it is sold, tomato ketchup is a #1 tomato sauce brand, but it's not just a slight #1. It's a dominant #1 in most geographies and accounts for between 80 to 95% of all market share for tomato ketchup. So they had a unique challenge. The question was, have we sold as much tomato ketchup as there is to sell in the world? Unless we find life on Mars, should we accept that this is as much stuff as we can sell? And being good marketers and that they are, and being good researchers that they are, they wanted to work out, is there something we can find out about the market which tells us which of the 4 Ps we might switch and of the product, or sorry, which we might switch. The 4 Ps are product, price, promotion, and place. That they could maybe change and might help sell more tomato ketchup. So they started with their customers. They put cameras with their customers' permission in kitchens, in dining rooms, in of lots of their customers all over Europe, and they selected customers at different stages of life. So some older couples, for whom kids had left home, some families, students living together, young couples just moved in, and all that sort of stuff. They observed people using the product. So lots of the things that they found out didn't surprise them, because they were consistent with what they already knew. So they understood the role that tomato ketchup played, both in terms of preparing a meal, but also during a meal. It was reinforced to them that, particularly in families, the kids were the biggest consumers of the sauce. So lots of things which they already knew, but they found interesting was the dynamics around the dinner table, because often kids would start their meal, and any parent that's maybe on the call can vouch for this, with some tomato ketchup on the side of their plate, and that would inevitably be eaten. And at some stage, the kid would ask their parents, "Can I have some more tomato ketchup?" And sometimes the parent would say, "Sorry, little Johnny, you can't, because you haven't eaten all your vegetables." And maybe little Johnny would finish his vegetables and eat his tomato ketchup, but also sometimes little Johnny wouldn't get his tomato ketchup because mom or dad just couldn't be bothered. So I don't say that judgmentally. I mean by that is that very often parents are coming in from maybe a very busy day at work. They were preparing the meal. This is the first time all day today that they've had the chance to sit down, and they just wanted to eat their dinner in peace. And this exact point lit a fire from within Heinz, and was the recognition or realization that it was the convenience of the product that was stopping little Johnny going for a second portion of tomato ketchup. It was nothing else. So that problem statement, if you like, led them to say, how can we improve the convenience of the product? And it was around that time that there was a lot of innovation around its packaging. So they went from a glass bottle, which you may all remember, the pain of trying to get that last bit out at the bottom of the bottle. You had to hit the top, and they moved from the glass bottle to the squeezy bottle that you can see here. It's funny, we regularly find brilliant insights purely by observing people using a product in the real world, that tells us things that we could not learn any other way. And that's the key. There's no usability test that you could set up. There's no survey question that you could ask. There's no other way of finding out that it was a convenience of the product that was the key piece that still people can't do without. And what this brings us back to is the part of observational research versus our behavioral research. So let me finish off then. Allow me to close off with a few of our principles as we think of it, closing off, I suppose, maybe the formal part of our second UX Masterclass. Firstly, richness of insight comes from across the matrix. Once we get insights from across the qualitative and quantitative, across attitudinal and behavioral, we get a real rich understanding of our users. Please repeat 1,000 times, maybe not so much like we do here in Logic and Magic, but you're not your user. You're not designing for you. The answer which is in your head is almost definitely not the answer. That is in your user's head. The reason that we have to research is because we have to earn the right to design, and we don't have that right if we don't know our users. Identify the plan against your biases. The key thing, the world of biases, is to recognize that we have them. We all have them, and then put plans in place to help us mitigate against them. See your first job as solving problems. So make sure you leave a program of research with a good sense of what the user problem is. And finally, the best indicator of future behavior is past behavior. Yeah, thanks everyone for sticking with us. Some of your questions have came through. So at this point, yes, please add any more you might have in the comments, and we'll be able to see those there. Yeah, we had asked during the week. There was a poll posted which is asking which topic would you like most to know more about, and the front or the leading result on that was UX research pitfalls to avoid. So yes, the first point that I noted down was confirmation bias. Only seeking out information that confirms pre-existing beliefs or assumptions. That's something, yeah, definitely a pitfall to avoid if we can, and always being I suppose aware of it, and those other I suppose biases that we mentioned as well. There's a lot of different ones, and it comes in different forms. So being aware of those, and yeah, avoiding them if we can. Asking leading questions. As Sir Appleby showed us in the video, yeah, it's very, very easy to do, and you can get all sorts of different results at the end to back up maybe your hypothesis. But yeah, asking questions in a way that influences or biases participants' responses is another one that we should try to avoid. Try and stay as neutral as we can. And the third point is unrealistic expectations. Expecting immediate solutions or insights from a single research study, and hopefully the first section we covered today on the different quadrants of our graph created by Rohr, having a widespread of research methods and insights from across that the different methods shown, I think, is a key there to avoid that pitfall as well. So yeah, thanks for participating in our poll, everyone. We'll just close off that formal piece, and Joanne will start off Q&A, going through a few of your questions, Cynthia.
Yeah, thanks, Connor. So yeah, lots of great insights there on UX research, and looking forward to future masterclasses on those methods. So feel free to pop your questions in the chat on LinkedIn or YouTube, and we'll do our best to answer them either here, but if we run out of time after this masterclass. So I do have one question here from Sarah. So Sarah asks, how do you determine which research method to use for a particular project? So yeah, I think this is a great question, because determining which research method to use at the start of a project is, I think, the most important phase of a project, because the results then guide the solutions. So it's important to think of things like your project goals or your objectives, who your users are, what is the project timeline, what is the project budget, and then any available previous resources. So is there any previous research been done on anything that you want to ask? So I would say create a learning plan, ask the questions then to see where the gaps in your knowledge are. Then you can list out the methods that you're going to use to help answer those questions. So again, as you mentioned, it's important where possible to have a mix of quantitative and qualitative research methods. So for example, quantitative could be reviewing the analytics to identify drop-off points, and qualitative could be user interviews to see firsthand what the challenges they face. Great, so I hope that answers your question. Do we have any more questions there?
Yeah, there's one here of that's came in. I've popped it up on our screen. Is if yeah, thanks Rory for sending this in. If faced with varied feedback post user testing, some finding the designs intuitive versus some not at all, what would influence your decision to keep change the designs? Think yeah, Rory, for me it would relate back to yeah, close to, I think it was Joanne brought us through those examples of like the baseline numbers that the likes of Jakob Nielsen, the Nielsen Norman Group would recommend if you're doing like a observational type or maybe usability test or user interview, that it would be that baseline of like 5 tests, and once you start to see actual trends and repeating information coming through, that you can start to draw up some sorts of decisions to be made if there's something needs changed, or you need to gather some I suppose ideas for the next step. So and again, once you're looking at that quantitative methods, that it's much higher numbers and much higher participants involved. So I think they're very good numbers of users to, I suppose, speak to and lean on to start with, and yeah, hopefully that's helpful on that point.
Yeah.
Just see if there's any other questions that we can pick up in this point. Just see one from one there I'll just bring up as well.
Yeah.
How should we address situations where user research reveals that users are accustomed to an experience that does not align with established UX best practices? Yeah, and I think that's thanks for this question. Send it in. I think I was very whenever I used the term best practice earlier, it's definitely a term that is used far too often, and it's I think sometimes that if you're the products and services that we're creating and making for clients, I suppose, and online, all different ranges, that sometimes that they're so new that best practices potentially can form out of what you've created. And I think there's, if you weigh quite heavily and rely on what works and those things that are fundamental, I don't think you go too far wrong. But yeah, if there's stuff that if there's results and insights that come back after you've started to do your different methods of testing, and I think once you start to see trends there, I think you start to have to make those decisions. Well, our best practice, we stick with it very rigidly, or we start to I suppose listen to our users and see, if so many users are all facing this same issue, but best practice tells us to go another way. I think you have to start then to consider, maybe we should start to listen to the users and have those observational tests and watch what they're doing and ask those questions. And I think best practice can potentially not fill all those gaps. So hopefully that has helpful.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like best practice would be like a baseline, and then basically research what your users would be able to determine what is the best for them.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's all the questions that we have through. So again, thanks everyone, and I'll just go on to our final closing slides. So we have to get a few shameless plugs in, and as you can imagine, so if you'd like to learn more about us or sign up to our newsletter, take a photo of the QR code and you'll be directed straight to the Logic and Magic site, and you can do that. If you enjoyed today and want to join us again, our next two Masterclass webinars will both be coming up in May. Emma will be going live on the 15th of May to talk about all things strategy and marketing. And on the 22nd of May, Katie will be parting with some secrets of creative retail. So we would recommend joining both of those if you can. Our UX Unlimited service is now live. And if you feel like you could benefit from having an expert UX team deployed to support your business in 2 days, not 90, one that is ready to alleviate pressures from your team and deliver world-class user experience, UX Unlimited gives you the hassle-free access to those experts. You can tap into our team without a long-term commitment. This could be the way to get through your backlog. We offer flexible plans, flat monthly fees, and unlimited usage. So please reach out if you'd like to hear more about UX Unlimited. And lastly, if you're a UX lead or head of UX and you're interested in joining our UX Roundtable panel discussions about the topics, trends, and tips affecting our industry, please let us know. And yet to close then, we'll be sending out an email in the next 24 hours with a link to the recording. Simply email back if you'd like to have a free UX audit, and supposed to highlight and let you make sure you remember it's the fastest person to respond to that email, that whenever it comes in will be the winner of the UX audit. Simple as that. So it's fastest fingers first, and if you get your reply in first, you'll get that free UX audit. So finally, Joanne and I would like to thank you all for joining us. We'd love you to keep the conversation going on social media and get in touch with us. If you have any other queries or questions, you can get in touch with us on our email addresses here. Thanks everyone. We'll see you all soon.
Yeah, thank you.